Right, it's 6 o'clock. So welcome to Hexham Town Council of the 11th of April 2022. Everybody, lovely to be here in the sunshine. So our first agenda item is to listen to any residents who have any questions on the matter of Hexham. We have to introduce yourself.
Yes, Philip Clark, Hexham resident. The trees on the sea only got a life of about 15 years left in them. Now, we often see in the papers where various organisations are looking to plant trees. I was wondering if the council could possibly take this matter up, and not knowing that much about trees, I would think there'll be enough room between the existing trees to put a sapling in, which would mean when those trees were not down, we would still have a full lot of trees.
Thank you for that. So, Jamie Clark is making notes. We will speak to the council tree officer and local team who will have I do recall when I have spoken in the past that they do have forward planning of tree replacements, etc. But we'll ensure that is the case.
But there is Hexham Space for Nature have a tree project for Hexham, and we're liaising closely with them. They're all quite expert in their field, so they will be doing a survey of the trees in Hexham that need replacing, and the trees, especially the ones along that alley up the hill towards the top of the seal, have been identified as ones that need replacement trees in between. But there are more plans afoot that they've been very meticulous about, that they're not just going to start work on that until they've done that proper research. And I hope that helps. So you can always ask again.
Through your chat. So we're about to launch as County Council. I'm just reading from my email. A new scheme specifically called Local Authority Treescape Fund, specifically actually to look at existing woodland and do that kind of exercise that you're talking about. There's a kind of dedicated email address which is called enquiries.forest@northumberland.gov.uk, and if you direct into that group, then that's part of something that we're kind of looking at. So we just launched that, so that would be another thing to check.
So that email address is enquiries.forest@northumberland.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you. That has inspired quite a bit of conversation and things that we probably didn't know about. So thanks for that.
Barry Collins, resident. I see that last week, Mr. Mayor, that you attended Egger and you intend to go on future occasions. I was wondering if maybe you could, I may be a silly question, but maybe you could ask the people there if there's maybe been some advance in engineering, and that there could be some means of condensing the vapour that comes out of the chimney and maybe recycle it and reclaim the heat and stuff that goes into the atmosphere. I wonder if this may bring that into any conversation.
Certainly we've had a conversation, and I was right next to that Jimmy staff, along with seeing the rest of the Egger function. Now that unit, the Egger is a single unit, is incredibly complicated and very, very high tech. And I was amazed good quality and how it reclaims very, very well everything. There's just a little waste. And what we're doing with chimney stack is the filter, obviously it's the heat extraction over there, so there's like bits of wood, etc. Also go up there, but they do actually, I think it was infrared or something, where they actually that. The wood, so it actually drops down in the heat. and it's just heat exhaust. But they do try to cover as much as they can. Certainly the waste wood product is virtually nil, which is astonishing. It's a highly efficient operation. But certainly, we mentioned that to them, but they're interested many millions in operating that site to be really world class. But we will mention that
It's maybe some advances in engineering.
Sorry, Doug. Oddly enough, at the commercial section, at the event that we had at the event, I was talking to the vicar, who, oddly enough, he looked into the same question that you raised.
yes.
So there has been some interest in the Abbey. So the Abbey was thinking about trying to heat it from there as well.
Yeah.
And we're looking in our programme of work to come in terms of doing a footprint survey and doing analysis in terms of how do we reach net zero, in terms of how do we reach net zero for at that point, and we might be able to do so something. It's on our radar. I haven't got the solution, but certainly something we will consider.
Yeah, so the heat exhaust, Matthew, will you come in?
Yeah, thank you for your question. So we've commissioned, I think it's 7 now, 7 what we call district heats feasibility studies, and one of which is Hexham. And as it happens, I have a meeting with EGA tomorrow to start to talk about how we look at, as part of the scope of that, exactly the thing that you're talking about, and be interested to think about the customer base, including the Abbey. The complexity, just to be completely open, is how do you get the energy from where you could capture it so you don't, in the most efficient way, to people's homes and to businesses. And obviously with EGA being down the river there, it's quite far into the kind of the resident base. So I wouldn't want to pretend it isn't extremely complicated, because it is, but it's definitely on the list as it is, for example, to look at, say, the mill in Prudder, because that would also kind of generate quite a bit of heat, for example, and other market towns are available. But yeah, we want to look at that for all the reasons that you quite correctly said.
Excellent. Anybody else? Okay. Well, brilliant question so far. So let's look for brilliant question number 3.
President Meyer.
Oh, sorry, I do apologise.
It was just something I was thinking. It's I hope the clerk, and I appreciate all the excellent work she does, and she accepts this as not a complaint, but as a feedback and information. But when members of the public bring questions up, it sometimes gets lost where it goes, and I was wondering if she has a good system of logging in later minutes where they get discussed. Sometimes the public questions seem to get lost, whether they actually go to a meeting at the county council, if there was some reference to that. But I try to trace things, and I seem to get lost somehow. I've gone through county council's minutes and can't really find them. That's just feedback and information. More than
Well, we'll tell you that it raised the public toilets and anything, that's been raised next.
Well, that's right, but it's still nowhere where you can really look to see, other than what you said at the last meeting. It really will lit the fuse of the Northumberland County Council are doing all the toilets in Northumberland, so we really lit the fuse for get some action.
Right, thank you very much. So,
I'm not sure I can raise a brilliant question. Yeah, Matthew Green, relatively recent president of Hexham. A brilliant question. I hope to think this is cheeky. I can't stay for the meeting, but I wanted just to take the opportunity to offer us to make comments at the beginning.
Yeah.
Having come hot foot from a meeting with some friends about the possibility of hosting Ukrainian refugees, and having been to the Hexham Together event, which I know a couple of your members here were very influential in hosting. Because the need is there now, and there is some urgency about this, and to capture the goodwill and the determination to make a contribution, I think a lot of people are expressing, I wonder whether now, or not necessarily now, but in the near future, it's possible to start to get a sense of the council's position on hosting, supporting, providing the kind of services and support and information that I think a lot of people are looking for. In the absence of anything sensible from central government, we know we have to do it locally here and make it work locally here. I just hope we can turn that goodwill and that energy fairly quickly into some helpful and sensible moves that make these things happen.
So good question. Obviously, you mentioned hosting, but the town council does not run any hosts, so it can't host. But certainly, through our members who are very influential on the Ukraine refugee position, we will be trying to bring together and communicate and try and draw people together and help in any way we can. Is there, Mike, do you want to come in now?
Yes, yeah, so not to take words out of your mouth, so the council doesn't, the town council doesn't have a position on the Ukraine, but using the network of people that we know, myself and Marianne and others have been active in the background, organising 2 events. I think you were at the event. We're just about to put a website together. So outside of this, as a resident, Ariane is a resident, as residents, we're putting a website together. We're now talking to quite a lot of people sort of encourage that, and then Ariane's now organising another meeting for when?
To the 23rd of April, but we're going to be sending out that email this week, early this week. Hopefully tomorrow, we've got another big meeting tomorrow with all the organisers. But yeah, we're probably going to go down into CIC for this, because we also need to have the grants for an administrator, because at the moment we're doing everything from our own money and from our own time. But we are, I hope you got the feeling we are trying to be as professional as possible about this, so we are going to be moving the pace with all this. We will have lots more information by the end of this week for everybody. So,
Very quick response, thank you. It wasn't my comment and question wasn't intended as a criticism.
no,
I think the energy and the leadership of some members has been really, really impressive.
thank you.
It was just an impress on the sense of goodwill and spirit which is there to be captured.
Yeah.
Just to follow up, why doesn't the council have a position on it?
Well, it depends on the question. If the position is like, we think it's terrible as a whole in Ukraine, I also do. It's not to be disgraceful, that and sort of state, you mentioned last month, and we thrown the flag of Ukraine on our flagpole. But obviously, we want to help in the best way we can.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry, Councillor, thanks for the moment. So just to speak.
Thank you. Is there anybody? Thank you. Okay, right. Apologies for absence.
Councillors Ball, because it's a work-related inquest all week, and also Councillors Harpen, Principal Ferris, Ferris Aiken, and Bell.
Declarations of interest. Anybody got any additional interest declarations? To agree the minutes of the council held on 14th of March. First for accuracy. No. Any items arising? So that's page 2, page 3. Page 4. Okay, so I can sign those. Thank you. Right. Right, so item 6 is to receive declarations of acceptance of office to Councillor Tom Pearson, who, when he signed a bit of paper and attends his meeting, becomes a councillor. Thank you. Good. So we welcome Tom to our meetings for the council. Welcome aboard. Hope you'll provide enrichment to the council as we go forward. Right, number 7 is a presentation from Matt Baker. So that's, we would ask that you have 20 minutes or so, and then we'll have 10 minutes of questions. We'll go into that. And we also welcome information John.
Okay, I have to clarify two things. One, an apology because we were meant to be here before and we basically, I missed my diary, so I'm very sorry. And secondly, I do have a generic problem with talking to time. So if you're going to stick to 20 minutes, you may have to tell me to be quiet. So Rachel and I are kind of here from the climate change team. So my name is Matt Baker. I'm Director of Climate Change at the County Council. I've got a couple of other roles as well, which are probably less relevant for today. I do also want to say by saying thank you. So I didn't realise Alison was also a councillor. But Alison, you did the work of art, didn't you?
Yes.
So this is really interesting, right? So we will go through the slides in the order that they're kind of written in a second. But Alison, without embarrassing Alison, sent an email into, I think, Glenn or straight to the Leland Council and basically said, I want to do an art installation, in the seal for COP26. And I think when she probably sent that email, she probably thought, there is no chance in heck that this is going to happen. Now, one of the absolutely amazing things about climate change in Northumberland County Council, regardless of what party you belong to or don't belong to, is Glenn Sanderson. Because he's the leader, which is cool, but he's also our lead man for climate. So basically, when anything like that goes to Glenn, he just emails it straight to us. And one thing that we do quite well, which is exciting but sometimes terrifying, is we're quite good at making things happen in the climate change team. So we're like, brilliant, right? Alison, fill your boots. And literally all we did was stop them cutting the grass. That was the only thing we had to do. And from that came an amazing piece of art, which in itself is fantastic, but an awesome communication tool for Hexham, for the town of Hexham. So, and for me, that is such a perfect example of how climate change has to be. It has to be community-led, and we'll talk more about that as we kind of get into this. Now, we can do things sort of centrally, and we can come up with ideas and frameworks, we can access funding and make things available and come up with our own ideas, but ultimately, climate change is the biggest behavioural change programme that the planet has ever seen, and that starts here. So the reason why we're kind of come and do these things is because actually without you asking us to, we can't, I don't think, get anywhere near our target of net zero as a county, as a country, and a society writ large, and that's so important. So Alison, thank you.
Thank you. I sent my email at like 10 o'clock, I think it was, on the Sunday night.
Right.
And at 10:30 the next morning, I had a response.
There you go. Obviously, our SLA for everything is not. So this is Kill the Water. So some people who've seen this kind of presentation or version before know I always start here. So basically, to deliver net zero for the county, we have to do the equivalent of emptying the water out of Kielder twice in terms of CO2 savings. So everyone in this room will have been to Kielder at some point because it's just down the road. And for me, that's the kind of the enormity of what we're trying to do. We actually did we had a kind of offsite in Kielder Castle as a climate team, which sounds grand, doesn't it? But Climate Castle is currently kind of going through sort of some upgrade activity, if we could call it that. So there's very little power, there's definitely no Wi-Fi, there was no screen that worked. And it was definitely didn't pass health and safety. But in the morning, we basically spent some time there thinking as a team where we were and what we were doing, which was cool. But then in the afternoon, and this is kind of really important about right thing in right place, we went and looked at some heat box. So if you think about the enormity of our challenge, one of the greatest advantages we have as a county is Kielder Forest. The slight issue is Kielder Forest is in exactly the wrong place because it's planted on a whole load of shallow peat. So not only do we have a net zero challenge, but we also have a really interesting kind of fabric challenge as a county to get the right things in the right place. And to do this properly, we have to do it right. And again, I think that's kind of really important in terms of thinking through what we do and how we do it. And an example of that was talking to Mike earlier about EV chargers. So there's lots of
discussion and dialogue about EV charging, isn't there? You know, we need hundreds of thousands of EV chargers to kind of facilitate the transition to an electrification journey. That's kind of what the media says. But when you kind of narrow that down into specifics, in terms of our role as a county council and your role as a kind of parish council, actually only 20% of homes in the county don't have access to some sort of space in their home where they could put a charger. So that immediately kind of limits the question down to a small number. And then the next question becomes, well, how realistic is take-up? Because EVs are quite expensive still. So we've got to target into the right place, because probably we think in about 5 to 6 years, if you go back in time and look at petroleum cars, look at the combustion engine, the second-hand market will kind of lock in, which will then make EVs a lot more affordable for a lot more people. So at that point, we need to make sure the infrastructure is available. So in 5, 6 years' time, people who want to swap their car for a second-hand EV go, oh, brilliant, I can do that, and I can charge it. So there's got to be, you know, a kind of a direction to this and an intelligence to this. And I think that's where I hope is that the county can help, because alongside myself and Rachel and kind of other colleagues, we've got a small team of basically data scientists. And so everything we do is very, very evidence-based and data-driven. So there's a, to kind of put it a different way, there's a whole lot of method in the madness, even though sometimes it feels a little bit mad. Oh, Rachel's clicked me on. That's absolutely fine. So to kind of break down our opportunity, if you like, to get to net zero, we've constructed a plan which actually is 2 years. It's a 2-year plan. The plan finishes in December. So we're actually in the process of drafting the next 2 years. So the plan is to basically create a cycle of information, because we couldn't guess now what's going to happen in 6 years' time, right? We just wouldn't know. So we're going to have like a 2-year planning cycle, which effectively kind of takes us through to our kind of journey to net zero. The plan's constructed across all the action areas, which is kind of what you see here. Tonight we're going to talk specifically about heating existing buildings and renewable energy generation in the context of people's homes. We're going to do that in a little bit more detail, and Rachel's going to take us through that and specifically talk through some grants that we've got available for low-income houses, for people who have kind of a high level of need in those particular areas. So at the same time as tackling climate, we're also going to be tackling things like health inequality, because the two things are inextricably linked. And of course, we're talking about engagement and partnerships, which we'll talk a little bit about a different fund that's available, which would allow you to kind of do things with your community. So that's how it's structured. The next slide is Rachel, who's going to take you a little bit of detail on warmer homes and how we access that. We'll take questions at the end. I have no idea how to do the time, but I'm sure we'll do it. Just Rachel.
I'm not as good at speaking as this. So I'm part of the climate team, and my remit is looking at heating, and specifically domestic heating. So that's obviously a big part of climate change, is trying to reduce emissions coming from homes, but also to make people's homes warmer as well. We've got a lot of inefficient housing stock in the UK, unfortunately, and it's a really big task. So at the moment, the central government has made available funding that can target eligible households for energy efficiency measures. So what we've done in the council, we delivered our first round of funding with a delivery partner, and that went well, but lessons learned from that were that we would like to do that in-house moving forward. We think that it's a really great opportunity for the council to bring sort of more control over the entire project, but also it will help build sort of social value within the county, and by bringing more jobs locally as well, and using more local suppliers to deliver the energy efficiency measures as well. So we've decided to call it Warmer Homes, and we will be hopefully tackling fuel poverty, and we will be targeting eligible homeowners in the county, and we'll be able to offer, the idea is with the whole project is that it's fabric first measures. So we hope to get a home warm before we start changing the heating. So that is things like external wall insulation and loft insulation. Internal wall insulation, if it works, whatever we can do to keep the house warm. And then once we've got the houses warm and insulated, then we can start looking at different heating measures, stuff like air source heat pumps and solar panels as well. We would like to put on as well if we have enough funding per home to offset some of the electricity costs as well. So I'm sure everyone's interested in what's eligible at the moment. So currently the funding streams and central government have classified homes that have an EPC rating of D or below as eligible. But on top of that as well, the household needs to have an income of less than 30,000 or be on, there's various different benefits, but on a type of benefits as well. So we're definitely targeting the homes that need the help most. We're aiming for our most vulnerable people and helping them. Now, we can deliver for privately owned properties, but then also private landlords can also apply, but they need to pay in some of the cost against the grant. This is actually a really big part of the housing stock in the UK. So our best performing houses are social housing, then we've got private housing, and then the poorest performing are the privately owned let homes. So we would like to target
And before you click on Rachel, the other thing which is extremely relevant about this is private landlords, and I'm going to say by law now, or if not by law yet, it's coming in soon, should only be letting properties which are C and higher. So effectively, they're meant to be doing this. So if you're a landlord and the government's now actually saying to you, well, if your tenant meets these criteria and your home isn't fit for rental purpose, if you like, then we're prepared to pay 2/3 of the cost towards something which actually you should have had to do yourself anyway. So I think it's in Newcastle now, where they've actually started to put some posters sort of targeting the landlords in quite a punitive way to say, you know, you must comply with this new regulation. So there's something really important here around this isn't optional for exactly the kind of homes that we're looking at. There's the reason why the kind of scheme, the grant is designed this way. And to be kind of super specific and go into a tiny little bit more detail about this. So Councillor Kennedy, Councillor Suzanne Fairless, can't forget the second of her name, Councillor Suzanne, and Councillor Trevor Sesford, isn't it, I think. So I met with all three, there you go. It rained massive.
I must have gone out of room here.
I've met with all three of the councillors to basically say, can we do some specific community events in Hexham to effectively encourage people to participate in the scheme? And if I had my phone in my hand, and I don't, the first one of those is in Wentworth, and a date in the future, which is the 27th of April.
Is that when you say Monday?
So coming very soon, and we'll be very specific with the date when we check our phones. And you know, one of the things which we absolutely want to kind of talk about is how do we use this network of people, because that's what I see this group as, a network of people to bring the people in from your areas into that conversation. Because for the right people, you know, for the avoidance of doubt, this is free. It's grant money, right? There's no match funding for the homeowner. It's absolutely monies which, if done right, and I would kind of underscore what Rachel said about why we're doing it in-house, which is making homes kind of warmer and more efficient first, and then thinking about heating solutions and around generation solutions. This is actually a route to people taking money off their fuel bill. And for all the reasons that we don't need to go into tonight, which we're all completely aware of, with the kind of cost of living crisis and the kind of the tragedy in Ukraine that we've already heard from a colleague about, that situation is only ever going to get worse, at least in the kind of near term. So this scheme, whilst absolutely fantastic for net zero, is also incredibly important for social inequality and kind of health inequality reasons. And the other thing I would say, as an example of that, if you look at the criteria, pensioners on state pension and only on state pension, living in older property which might not be the most thermally efficient, are absolutely the kind of focus of part of this scheme. So there's also a subset of really vulnerable older people who could benefit from this, which I can't stress enough.
Sorry, a big point I forgot because I've kind of lost my head, getting nervous, is that part of us delivering in-house as well. We have a website now on the council website where you can sign up, and the idea is that maybe you might not be eligible this time, but we're hoping if people give us permission, we can create a database, and then I'll know, I know it sounds silly, but when I apply for funding from central government, I maybe make an estimate of how many homes, but if I start getting this data and start realising, oh, there's actually 1,000 houses that are in this EPC rating that need this piece of work done, I can then start making those applications that are really specific and targeted. If that makes sense.
It does,
Yes.
and our colleagues in Bays, whereas probably like 12, 18 months ago, when in part they were probably distracted a bit by the pandemic for obvious reasons, have been much more inclusive now in the design of the scheme. So these schemes are coming from, so Bays, the Department of Business, Energy, Industry, and something else. But Bays Government Business Department, if you will. And they are engaging us in a dialogue around kind of how should we kind of design these schemes. And as Ray says, the more information we've got, the more we can tell them. So for example, one of the questions that always comes up is there like a match funding option if somebody's kind of over the income threshold, which is a really good idea, right? And when we put that to them, they say, yeah, that's a really good idea. Let's do that once we've done all the homes under 30 grand, which is kind of hard to argue with, right? So it's kind of the more successful we are with this, the better, the more monies we'll be able to kind of bid for, and the more we'll be able to kind of push them into the kids.
Yeah, so a quick one on that is just that even if people if they don't think they're eligible, if they can still apply, we can still capture that data, and then if the requirements change or the eligibility changes, we can then email folk and say, actually now you might be able to get something. So that's my sort of big aim.
Yeah, so slightly different now. So this is Community Chest Climate Fund. So basically, at the last full council budget, we got signed off as part of that a recurring £50,000 pot. So it's kind of recurring every year. Don't know for how many years, but it's a recurring pot. And the idea of this fund is that communities can bid into the county for an amount of money, and there's smaller and larger. I'll explain that in a second. So smaller is that shouldn't say small bid and medium bid. That should say smaller and larger. So imagine that's a smaller and larger. The larger pots are for £1,000 to £5,000, and the smaller pots are from I think 200 to 1,000 from memory. And the idea being that money is for you to use locally towards something connected to net zero and climate change. And the way that we're going to assess the bids is basically how do they link back into the climate action plan. So those kind of 7 areas. You can imagine it's brutally logical, right? So does it link to one of the 7 areas or more than one of the 7 areas? One question. Second question, how many people will benefit? So you can imagine the more people that benefit are more likely to kind of be successful in the grant application. We have no idea, because we've never done this before, about will it be undersubscribed, oversubscribed. We just don't know. So we're basically going to open up the bids from the beginning of May, so we'll say the 1st of May, but that might be like a bank holiday or something, but that kind of time frame. We'll probably kind of open it up for 6 weeks and then assess them, see how many bids we've got, get some grant money out, and then probably run another round in October. And then if there's any money left, kind of run another round before the end of the year, and then get into that kind of cycle. There's a few examples of the kind of thing which it could be used for, but again, the reality is we don't know, right? So we're much more interested in how you would want to use the money in a way that works for your community, rather than us thinking we know what the right answer is for you, because we don't. What we can do is kind of direct you to the areas which we think will have the biggest impact on net zero, but how that works for you and your residents, we want to be guided by you because we don't know that. So that's good. Now, the last thing. So, all my presentations have a little bit of Ted Lasso in, which is what this is. So, does anyone know who Ted Lasso is? I'm probably not speaking to like an empty room. So, Ted Lasso, Apple TV, you can do other subscription services, including Netflix and Disney Plus and BBC, whatever it's called, BritBox now, I think. So, Ted Lasso basically is an American football coach who comes to the UK and coaches the football team. Right? That's kind of Ted Lasso. But he is the most positive, optimistic person you can imagine, but he's also grounded in a sense of reality and perspective. And for me, he epitomises what we need to do around climate, right? So yes, we have to be positive, but it's going to be really difficult, and we're going to be much better at doing this if we are working together in our communities than if we're trying to do this sort of on our own, kind of in our own little silo. And this is a sign which basically is in his office. And so if you forget everything we've talked about tonight, just remember that, and that will help when it gets difficult. That's it. Questions? Thank you.
Excellent, you did very well, I must say, 19 minutes.
Come on!
Yeah,
19 minutes.
He doesn't tell you that I was saying them all. So, Trevor, you were first.
Hi, Rachel. Matt. Good night. Matt, we've obviously talked before, and we came up with something that could be issues, and I know you've already given us the answers, but it's nice to share it with other people and two of us on the end of that TV word. And that is, well, actually, can I just jump ahead, because I noticed at the very end there, just make a note, you said the community chest climate fund.
Yes.
And you mentioned community centre retrofitting possibilities of it. Because I've chaired the community chest, technical community chest grant panel, and one of the things that we always get a lot of is applications from village halls and things like that, and it's nearly always to do with heating. So are you telling me that they could possibly also apply to the community chest climate fund for maybe installation work or something? Is that what you meant by that?
I mean, so yes, they can bid, because the group who can bid are kind of got to be like a charity, a parish council, a community interest group. So they could bid as a because they're that entity. In terms of what they bid for, that's kind of what I was sort of saying. We don't really know what people want to bid for and use it for. So at the moment, I would say I don't know, but please bid, and then we can just look at that in the round of other things, and it'll come down to kind of how many people might benefit from that. So
it just all seems to tie in together, so I
Yeah.
was pleased to see that at the very end. So that's good. And what I was going to ask about is the problems that we might face, and I've already been with you. But we're talking about, say, for instance, ground source heat pumps run by electric, substantially electric, and so we did discuss about the fact that when people come to these events that we're holding on the 27th,
yes,
they need to know things like, because a lot of people will just say, how much is it going to cost me? Or how much am I going to save me?
Yeah.
And we know the costs aren't going to be there, because it's 100% grant. And people are very skeptical when they say 100% grants. So they always say, these people on the telephone could be 100% grants, and then, you find it costs them lots of money. But we need to make that point very specific that they are 100% grants. But if you're talking about ground source heat pumps, of course, just recently we've had Storm Arwen and all the damage in that caused. I've just picked on one area, just because I drove through it yesterday. The Rothbury area was decimated. And what happens there, you lose electric, you lose your ground source heat pumps.
Yeah.
So,
so let me respond to that specifically.
Yeah, I'll let you respond to that, because you know what I'm going to ask anyway, because we already talked about it.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's something I think that needs to be addressed, and obviously more latterly the rise in electric charges. So I think people need to know that there's double safety valves there if things go wrong, and also the common question you're going to get asked, I know you'll get asked, but I've already been asked it, is what does it mean to them financially, as in you know, instead of paying £1,000 a year, is it going to be £980 a year? Which is only £20 less if you then got to repay all the house or put new carpets in. And you were going to find this out for me last time. We'll be getting a grant to make do repairs to the house, which of course damage.
Make do on.
I think they've got it now. I know anyway.
Yeah. So three things are kind of my old favourite. You know, the power goes out, electric pumps are rubbish, aren't they? So everybody who has a boiler, kerosene, gas, electric heat pump requires electricity for it to work. So if the power goes, we're all stuffed. But our kind of philosophy with this, and this is where we get into an interesting discussion with our housing colleagues, is I think everything should have a backup. So I live in an old house. I have a kerosene solution, but I've also got a wood burning stove. So I would never give up that wood burning stove because I live in quite a remote area, and if the power goes off, which it seems to go off quite a lot, I need that as a backup because my teenage daughters don't like it when there's no hot water and heating and things, and that's terrible. So that needs to be there. There needs to be a backup solution. But that's true for anything, and I think that's kind of really important. The second thing in terms of cost, so we can't answer the direct cost of people's homes because we kind of don't know what their consumption is, and we need to know the details. So the answer to that is the sort of the steps that we go through. So the team that Rachel described, which is going to be a county council team, takes the resident through what's called a retrofit assessment, which is basically looking at the measures that will be most applicable for that home. And from that assessment, they should be able to calculate what the change is in terms of lost energy, which means you should be able to do some kind of rough calculation in terms of if you were to put a heat pump in, for argument's sake, how much it would cost to kind of generate the kilowattage required. But if you weren't, and you were just using, a regular kind of gas boiler, and I'd want to talk about gas in a second if I can, then you would also use less gas, so you could kind of calculate that as well. I think gas is really interesting in terms of multifaceted solutions for places like Hexham, where you've got people on the gas in the main. A few people in kerosene, I think, in your area, Trevor. So we probably, and I don't know if there's anything in the energy plan about hydrogen. I bet there is, isn't there? I don't know if we know. Yeah.
They're quite high levels.
Yeah. So we are expecting the this is recorded, isn't it? Okay. We are expecting the gas network to be utilised because it's an asset which has got a lot of kind of sunk costing from central government to create a kind of, to begin with, like a hydrogen gas blend and then a hydrogen solution which will kind of link into mains gas. That's the kind of direction of travel. So I think it's really important that when you're making decisions around kind of on gas grid properties to kind of bear that in mind for the kind of the medium term. It's not, we don't love hydrogen in the climate change team. I could bore you with a lot of nerdy science as to why, but we don't rule the country, so we're not allowed to kind of change that. We can try, but I don't think that's going to happen. So we need to be kind of mindful of that from a kind of gas network perspective. So that then sort of leads me on to the next thing on the cost to run a pump. So the reason why the hierarchy is there that Rachel described, so thermally efficient, as much as possible, as quickly as possible, then the next step is, I think it's power and battery. So give people a source of power if they've got a south-facing roof, i.e. a kilowatt, a small kind of solar array, ideally blended with a battery, which interestingly, if the power did go off, would give you some backup, just as an aside in terms of resilience, especially for colleagues in Rothbury, for example. And then look at the heat pump if there's some kind of money left, which obviously then we'd kind of pull from the solar solution first. And if you had a battery, it would mean you could obviously utilise that energy when it was dark, and you could flatten off the kind of the demand a bit better. So
this retrofit exercise, which is why we want to do it in-house, is actually quite important to get it right and not just rush to a kind of heat pump first solution, which is sometimes what we've seen as.
Ginny, and then
I actually have two questions, and one of them generated by what you've just been talking about with hydrogen. I'll try the first one first because I think it will probably be a little bit simpler to answer. The first one is to do with your retrofitting. I live in an old property. My insulation is not great at all. I've emailed you today actually because I'm also on a low income. But part of my property is not double glazed. So is that going to cause issues when you're actually putting in insulation to older homes? So there's quite a lot of properties in Hexham that will have their original single glazing, which obviously is a bit of a waste of power as well.
Yeah, are you in a conservation area?
I don't know. We are, yes.
Yes, so the kind of the conservation areas are clearly more complicated. I can talk about that, about planning in a second, if that's okay. The sort of generic point about glazing. So for some of our social housing stock, we're allowed to use some of this grant money for double glazing. So that would be kind of part of the kind of the solution. When we say we want to go fabric first, we like literally meaning fabric first. And I would even go as far to say I want to do internal insulation as well. I didn't answer your point about make it good. I mean, I think the problem is a kind of make a good point. You know, we're not going to, you know, kind of come in and, you know, barrel and ball your home or anything crazy like that. But you know, I think there's something about making good on any kind of damage that has been that's been done. So the sort of the broad answer is, you know, we've looked at double glazing for social housing stock because the grants sort of are kind of born out of each other. I would expect we could probably look at that, but Rachel would know if I'm talking nonsense.
It all depends on the retrofit. So
Yeah.
once you've been assessed, so I wouldn't want to say, yes, that would be the best measure, but that's the whole, so the government fund requires the retrofits to be past 2035, and it's a really good sort of whole house approach to improving energy efficiency. So they've come in and they've assessed where they think. So if you've ever looked at your EPC rating, yes, okay. Yeah, lots of people say no, but I'm always looking at them. And you often get the recommendations. It's like a step further for that, and it's really looking at what the energy use will be and what's the best thing. So it could be that double glazing could be the thing for your home. It just all depends. The other slight limitation is the amount of money in the fund per home. So it's structured by EPC rating. So there might be a point where we could do so many measures, but then
yes, I was. Yes, my original question, which I now homeowners, do you anticipate being able to?
Yes, so the target's 500 with the current.
How long is a piece of string?
I was going to say that prices are going up a bit. So prices are going up. So what was originally bid for might not go as far, but then it could be that for some homes the measures that are needed are less expensive actually to really boost the EPC rating. So yeah, sorry.
No, also go back to Rachel's comment before. So it's at the moment the math is about 500, might be 450, 550. But if we can make a case for argument's sake, 15,000, we would go straight to Bayes and say, we've got 15,000 ready to go, what have you got? So I kind of see the question in a slightly different way. The point about conservation areas, so planning's fun, isn't it, right? So I'm not responsible for planning, it's a colleague of mine, Rob Murphy. I've only worked in the kind of county council for sort of 2.5 years, and governance was like a kind of a word I didn't really understand in the private sector by trade. But I'm learning to love governance. We went to a scrutiny committee, and Jeff Reed, who some of you may know, at the scrutiny committee basically said, yes, this is all very good, but I think it's really important that you work with planning on the next iteration of planning guidance in a great way, kind of committed as to kind of putting that into our kind of the report that we were taking through governance. So Rob and I are now committed, like formally through the governance process, to kind of work together on at a minimum a kind of set of guidance notes around the applicability of some of the local planning to climate change, but hopefully kind of a further iteration of that, which hopefully will allow us to kind of in a sensitive way address some of the kind of complexities of conservation areas. And sometimes, some of the things that we're hearing are, kind of not hugely sensible. Sometimes they're fair enough, but I think there's more we can do in that area, and that's something we both Rob and I.
Okay, I'll bring Penny into it.
Yeah, I don't know if you can comment on this really, because I don't know whether it's been generated by government or council. There seems to be an anomaly. So if you're a homeowner, then you qualify, you get 100%. But if you are a landlord, you get 66%. And a lot of poor people live in social housing. So they have a social housing landlord, but those landlords are not incentivised to actually reduce the burden of cost of heating houses on the very people who need it. And I think that needs raising somewhere. And even if you informally advise us that we get social housing tenants to lobby their social landlords, because it seems to me that is discriminating against the people who are probably most in need.
Yeah, Rachel can answer this in different.
And there's a social housing decarbonisation fund that's just been launched. So it's the first wave, it's coming up, it's beginning now. But then it's going to move forward. So, what was it? It's something like the next 8 years is another 8 million or something. So there's a
And in that first round, we did with Carbon, Benicia, and our housing stock. And how much did we get?
1.2 million. But so the idea is it's going to keep scaling up though. So this is another thing where people are finding their feet. But so now social housing providers can apply for wave 2, which comes out in the summer? Sometime in the summer.
So there's a specific scheme that
It's
addresses
targeted,
the thing that you're describing, which isn't this scheme.
Okay.
This is for private, rented, and homeowners. That scheme is for, kind of Northumberland County Council for the homes, the houses that we own, for Benicia, for the house that they own, to effectively execute the exact same model for their housing stock to address that very important need that you just described.
100%, so they qualify, they get 100%.
No, it's the same thing. So Benicia needs to put a third in.
Right,
and
that's
we
my
would
point then. That's absolutely my point. I think that's hugely short-sighted. Wherever it's originated, I think that it needs that needs to be addressed as the poorest people live in rented accommodation in the main, and they are carrying the burden. And we need to incentivise landlords to do it. Not give them 66%.
Points well made, and I think to be. Right, one more question, we'll bring us to the next one.
Okay, well, I'll have to email you the questions. I've got us 4. Let me just pick out the one that I'm most interested in then. How quickly do the applications get processed once you apply? For the, you know how you said on the 1st of May you're going to start open the bids for about 6 weeks?
Yes, so I think we're going to open it for 6 weeks, and then I think that the kind of the money, I don't have the exact date for it, but I can get you the kind of the exact timeline. We'll probably kind of be like July time. I'm sort of guessing that will be the kind of rough time for the next one.
Okay.
But we can confirm that.
Could I ask the Mayor, please, whether we can make sure that any applications for this kind of fund go via the Planning and Infrastructure Committee, so that everything's matched to our Hexham Net Zero Action Plan, so it's not, we don't all rush off in hundreds of directions, but make sure we do the most efficient applications that for town council that makes sense for us, that we've agreed on in advance. So through the Hexham Net Zero Action Plan, which is planning and infrastructure. Thank you.
Okay, so no, I'm just about the last question, just go back straight on for you, sorry. Right, so just to wrap up, 27th of April at 4:30 at the Wentworth, there's an event on there for the public to come and see this and maybe get their applications and to see how to apply for this. So the clarity is what the message that I met last couple of weeks ago. The clarity is one, insulate the home, two, solar, three, heat pump. That's the hierarchy of how it works on all this. 27th of April, we will be communicating through our social media on all of this, and we thank you for your time. It's been really, really interesting, and I'm glad it's gone a little bit longer than anticipated, but it's been very worthwhile. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope we can see you in future.
Yes.
Right, next item, just quite conscious of time. Next item is, and you may leave if you wish, Matt. Next item is to consider issues at Maidens Walk. Item A, to consider issues at the Maidens Walk car park Hexham. I've asked for this to be on the agenda on the basis that we have received, as a town council, numerous emails, which Jane is just going to get them up for us. Us as individual councillors have received contacts from persons highlighting that they've received fines for driving a car park, either paying or whatever they've done, and attending Marks, Spencer's and B&M, and receiving fines through the door. Now, what we have found out is that there was a change in the way that car park was controlled, as in automatic number plate recognition, and there's devices there where you can pay. Now, obviously, those types of devices work all over the place, all over the United Kingdom. I've used it before, and I'm sure everybody else has. But we've received, all these emails. I've received a load, you'll have received a load, and people are asking us at the town council what we're doing about it. So I thought it'd be best to bring this out as a conversation here, just to talk about these issues. So Jane has written to, so this is the ownership. So the landowner is Addiston, and they're a company based in Newcastle. We've been in communication with them, and we did invite them to come to this meeting this evening, which unfortunately they refused. We have written to the car parking company, Workflow Dynamics, to conduct the mechanism of capturing the automatic number plate recognition, etc. And there's also a third company called Huzzar who issued the fines. So there's three different companies. We've been in touch with them, trying to find out what's going on behalf of all the residents who received it. It's not just the residents of Hexham, obviously, because some people in Hexham could walk there. Those who live in the rest of Tyndale open by car, and they don't have a choice, really. So I just wanted to bring this debate here, so I'm opening it up for anybody wishing to speak. Trevor, wants to speak?
Thanks, shocking. I'm not going to deny that, but it's shocking. They're coming ham-fisted and try something without really sort of thinking too much about it. I've been in touch with Paul Jones and had to get in touch with a company Addiston to try to apply pressure from the county council, because it's a private car park, and at the end of the day, they can do what they want. And unfortunately, that appears to be what they are doing. And they refused to back down in the slightest. Now, one problem I had a while ago, and certainly, by the way, not standing up for their beer at all, but the data from the machines didn't go through to the data from the ANPRs. And so everybody got £100 fine that day. I believe it's all being refunded because of that error. But, and there's also the problem with some people who don't have cards, and struggle to pay cash apparently, and then you can't always get your refunds back with M&S like they used to do. But having talked to a couple of people, one suggestion is, well, if you can't get pressure from the punters and stuff at the shop there, or you can't get pressure from the county council because they're a private company. Who can you get pressure from? What I think you can get the pressure from is the people who are the tenants. And their tenants are Marks and Spencer's, and B&M, and people like that. So I think there might be a good idea that they're made aware of the fact that all of those emails are coming through. I mean, one assumes they probably knew anyway, but just in case they don't know, I think I would like to request that the council write to them and ask them, and make them all aware, and not just them, because there's other people who rely on them to park their cars as well, to make them all aware that, look, we know that people are no longer coming into Hexham, or Belgium, not coming into Hexham because of the problems they've had with this particular car park. Now, it may be alleviated shortly because the others will open not too much time, and then maybe let them egg on the chin, and they might have to do something about the parking system. But at the moment, it might be a good idea to write to their tenants and say, you're losing customers. You're losing customers because they're not coming here.
Yeah, just along the same lines here, to what extent Marks and Spencer's and being involved, how much of a problem has this caused you? And then if this continues and it gets worse, at what point will it become a really serious problem for you that you might have to do something really drastic and essentially maybe close their shops? But maybe you've got no understanding from that, and then say you want to work together with you to apply pressure onto the landlord.
Yeah, so I don't drive, so I don't have a car, but I was in Marks and Spencer's and the cashier, I overheard her talking to the person in front of me who said how worried she was about her job. So I talked to her and she said the footfall for Marks and Spencer's has totally been decimated. And I said, well, what is Marks and Spencer's doing? Because she explained who owned what on that site and who was the landlord, etc., etc. And she said it's gone to head office. And I think that so they are aware of the impact, but it's actually got to the point where staff are afraid of their jobs because it becomes. So I think it is urgent, and I think we ought to write, and we ought to encourage people who are talking about their experiences. We should encourage them to write to the company, but also to write to us, because the more evidence that we gather that there is at best incompetence going on, and what the results of that are, the better.
Okay, so Jim?
I just wanted to mention the overspill as well at the top of the steps behind B&M on Maidens Road. That has been, now it's £1 an hour, same company that owns the land and no cars parked there at all. Why would you park right outside the shops for the same amount of money or risk getting a parking ticket there as well? So that's actually a valuable area of parking that has been completely cut off to people. So I think that needs to be mentioned as well.
Thank you. I think that was very much.
My question would be, if these signs are done illegally, effectively, and she's not completely involved, because we're not very good and they can get involved in street bars and try and move this animal.
Anyone else ask?
Just to sort of back up what Penny was saying about if we're going to encourage people to write to the landlords, maybe also write to Marks and Spencer's directly saying, we want to support Marks and Spencer's, we love having Marks and Spencer's in the town, and we want to maintain Marks and Spencer's and being involved in the town. But at the moment, people are just so afraid to use the car park to access it.
Yeah.
And then that is the only reason that people aren't going.
Yeah.
So yeah, encourage people to send that message of support to Marks and Spencer's, explaining that that's the only reason why people aren't shopping there, because we definitely don't want to lose that shop from the town.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, well, I'll wrap it up. I think all the points are absolutely valid. Thank you for raising them in a very measured way. Us as a town council, we look at the whole of the town, and we also recognise that Hexham is a hub for not just for people who live in Hexham, but for much wider and broader. Half a Tyndale looks to Hexham. All roads lead to Hexham. For a lot of people, when they're doing a family shop, come and spend time in the town, whether it be schools and all this type of stuff, and they use all the facilities. Marks and Spencers and B&M are important parts of the fabric of this town. We want them to succeed. We want them to, to continue to have that relationship and to be a long-term partner for our town, and to provide that excellent service that they have done for several years. We are really concerned that this clumsy system that's been put in, I don't understand why it's caused so much problems. Why? Is it an education thing? Is it the way the system's been set up? Obviously, there's been no user testing done. It just was put in, and then all of a sudden people are getting fines. And it's not just getting the fine and then going, oh, we'll just write it off. For a lot of people, that's really concerning. Getting something through your door saying, you have done something wrong. You owe me £100 when they haven't done anything wrong. That's just really not right. How dare they do those types of things? They should have done all the testing. There should have been a whole month of going, right, this is coming in, people get ready, we're not going to build it, just get ready, but this is going to happen, and so you have a period of time to adjust and get yourself ready for this system. I mean, for those who are disabled, who would normally pay nothing on that car park, now they have to pay. So the people who are disabled may not have understood that there was actually changes in the rules for them. Because, if you went in on a Saturday, paid nothing, and you've been doing that for many years, and then the next Saturday you don't realise. How do you know? And then you're getting a threatening letter, give me £100 because you parked your car and went shopping. I don't believe any of the people who have done this, now this is just natural justice, none of the people who go there are doing it to steal car parking. They're doing it to purchase goods and services from Marks and Spencers and B&M. Nobody parks there and thinks, right, I'll go to work. The park there to use that car park to buy goods and services from Marks and Spencers and B&M. And I think it's just really, really appalling the way those people have been treated. I have to admit, like, we received one, my wife received one. She parked there, paid her 60p, shopped for not only our household, but she also shopped for 2 other households who've got disabled people in there, and we do that regularly. And she spent 65 minutes parked in that car park, put the shopping in, came home, and then we get a bill. And I was looking at it going, well, you paid just on the credit card, you paid the 60p, and I realised the 60p is for 60 minutes. She actually spent 65 minutes because she was doing 3 shops. And it's 5, so it was a 5 minutes extra that resulted in a fine. So we've written to them and said, look, this is the first time we don't usually use the car to go to Marks and Spencers and do shopping and stuff, but we did it for this reason. And what you're saying is that you're fining us for so we've tried to steal 5 minutes worth of time, which is obviously not the case. This was just an unfortunate error. We do hope you look at it with some grace. So we're waiting for a response to that. But so I don't think that needs to be mentioned. But to the people of Hexham and the people of Tynedale who've received this, we do look at this very, very importantly, and we will stand for you because we do not think this is the right thing to do, and we will do our level best to make sure Marks and Spencers and B&M are going concerns into the future. And it's very distasteful what's happened here with those 3 companies. It has caused absolute disruption and upset to the people of Hexham and the surround. So we'll take all those actions that's been said tonight, and I do thank you for a very, very good debate. Right, item 9, Mayor's election. Okay, so busy month. So highlight, so we've had a reception where we celebrated volunteering in the town, and we had a lovely time. It was great just to see all the you know, lots of people interfacing with each other, getting to know one another, and, you know, getting good connections. And we also honoured a person who's done some volunteering, exceptional volunteering with the Stewart and Bailiff on the park for his services to park run. He set that up along with the team. His work for the food bank and also for the NHS wages, free fetching and carrying of medicines, etc. to those who are who can't. So that was excellent to provide him with that. He was very thankful for that. Saturday, Stephen Ball organised the Town Crier event, which was a really good, really enjoyable event. We had 3 good candidates: Joe Mills, Helen Weymouth, and John Doherty. They performed in front of a live audience, all good fun. And Joe Mills was appointed the new Town Crier, with Helen Weymouth the Deputy Crier. I think we've got 2 great people there, and we can use those 2 people superbly well. And I think having the big man and the smaller woman, we'll get so much richness from both of them in the coming years, and we thank them both for taking up that role. Lidl, we opened Lidl just a couple of weeks ago, so that was good. I've got to admit, I was really worried about the roundabout that takes you into Lidl. I wasn't sure how the engineering programme would work on that, but I have to admit, I think the County Council's done an absolutely sterling job. That roundabout was not so good beforehand, and I think they've done an excellent job in actually making it much better and better organised roundabout. And I'm really surprised at seeing that, because I thought it would be a bit of a struggle, but I think they've done an excellent job. Really impressive. I was asked to open a new service offering called Same Space, where people can rent space to do office work. Really an innovative solution for those who've been stuck at home for the last couple of years and maybe don't want to commute to Newcastle, but would like to use some workspace in Hexham. So Aidan Dunfield has started that new venture. Really exciting to see that Hexham has got that, and Aidan believes that this is the first one in the very north of England to actually be in a small town as opposed to being in the large city. So very exciting. We had the Net Zero Fair in this very room. All went superbly well. Lots of people attended that, and really good excitement and energy about all of that. I'm sure we'll have another in future. I was asked to go to Hewson Court, which is on the Corbridge Road, where the residents asked me just a few questions about what the town council does and what it plans to do. So that was a really enjoyable afternoon chatting with the residents of Hewson Court. Attended the Hexham Abbey celebration of the NHS and their response to COVID. Just the other night, it was a who's who of Northumberland. So there was people there, including the Duke and Duchess of Northumberland, the Lord Lieutenant and the deputies, the High Sheriff. All manner of people. It was a really big event. Actually, really impressive. I must say, very, very poignant. We've got 3 new cycling stands at the cemetery which have been just installed today. So those who cycle, so you'll get family benefits, so I'll get these as well. And also met Matt Baker, who we met today for a discussion on climate change action that the County Council is doing, and obviously we want to bring that to here today. So very, very busy, notwithstanding all the stuff with regards to needing support. Right, so our next item is to agree the accounts for payment. On 6. So I'll just go through the pages. Page 6. Right.
Just a query on the 6 bin liners at 588. Seems quite expensive for residents and people pick the big things up.
So I can't
It says £588 for 6 bin liners, which means the bin liner costs just shy of 90 quid or something. So that's on page 7, and it's 2, 3, 4th line down. CJL Fenwick.
Well, the bin liners.
Yeah.
Right. They're virtually the same as a bin, but literally just the inside. That is the standard cost. That was 6 of them.
So these aren't like.
They're not plastic bags.
So these are metal interiors
Yeah.
or full size public.
The shop ice mix, so that's very good. So well done. Right, so page 6, page 7. Page 8. Right, page 9. That's it. No, right, next item is to adopt the health and safety policy, which is page 10, page 11, page 12, 13, 14, 15. Any comments on that? Have you got that? Okay, thank you. The next item is the safeguarding policy. So that's on page 16. Any comments? No, are we happy with that? Good. Right, next item page is Council, item 13, Councillor Penny Brennan proposes that the Hexham Town Council convenes a poverty working group which will map local agencies who can support individuals who are in need in Hexham. So, Penny, over to you.
Right, thank you very much. This has come about because I was involved in helping a couple of people who were living rough on the streets in the marketplace in Hexham. And I went to the obvious agencies. As time elapsed, it became quite clear to me that, first of all, that there were very specific guidelines for each of the agencies that I'd gone to, and also that I was sort of making it up as I went along because I have no experience in this area. And despite trying to get support, it didn't quite work. So at the end of the process, I think that this is going to become more commonplace. I think we're going to see much more poverty in Hexham than we normally have in the past, and that they're going rough sleeping, and that happens down at Time Green. And I thought it would be useful because we've got a work being done on poverty proofing, which is slightly different. And I just thought it would be useful. I was talking to the churches about this. If we convened a group where we all pooled our knowledge and understanding and actually came up with some sort of, for want of a different way of describing it, a directory, so that if anybody's faced with this issue again, and it came about for me because the shopkeepers said there is a man who is sleeping rough, and it wasn't that they wanted him to go away because it's bad for business, it's because they were worried about him, because the weather forecast was so bad. And these two men slept outside in the snow. I do know that this is true. And so that's not acceptable. And I think that I was fumbling around trying to find out what to do. And so if we can get together with agencies who deal with this on a day-to-day basis, but those also in the town who may say, well, what we would have is a contingency fund, so that the churches would have money specifically to help people in need, that we need to work together to try and ameliorate this situation, because I do think it is going to happen again. So rather than waste the experience that I had as working with another person who lives in the town and working with various agencies, it would be good if that feeded into poverty proofing as well. And then I'm not necessarily saying that the town council is responsible for solving the problems of people living on the street, but actually that we could be available in some way or other so people knew what to do about it.
So, do I have a second? So, Jenny seconded it. Two straight. Does anybody else want to debate? Try with you?
Yeah.
You must go. And then, yeah.
Yeah, I fully understand what Councillor says there, and I did actually see. People say that the jewellers, the quilts, the mobile phones, and there's a beggar further along the street. Unfortunately, a bit of an issue going on, which I've been discussing with the police recently. And one of the problems is, I'm not saying these two right here, that's a different man, there's the rough sleepers. Some of these people have been brought in the mornings by van and dropped off at the went to the car park. And all the police are trying to do is to find out who they are. And the other people, the two I saw, could well be different to the ones you saw. I'm actually working in a housing list in Newcastle and have been taken to that establishment down there. So that was in the process. But I agree with the rest of the points you made. However, some time ago when we brought in locality coordinators in the Hexham, and one of the first things that we did was to meet with the locality coordinators, and we had one for Tyndale and I had one for all five different areas of the Northumberland Town Council, and we discussed what their role was. And one of the goals I had was to say what is actually happening in Hexham, and well, all over the country, but our Tyndale one was this area and put it in the Tyndale Valley and things like that. Because sometimes, unfortunately, you get things that happen, always with good intention, so let's make that very clear, always with good intention. But in actual fact, something 10 miles down the road is doing the same thing, or sometimes some other organisation within the same town are doing the same thing. So it's all about to stop duplication, and between the five and now, working together, there's an awful lot of this going on, and some of these things can act as county-wide schemes. We all know about those schemes that go on through county-wide, and some of them, of course, have to be more local, which is obviously what we're talking about here at this moment. But there is already a point of contact for this sort of stuff to happen. When we had the start of the COVID situation, there's a lot of people in this room all got involved with putting communities together, and they said various different things, and that's continuing now. Now, you'll have seen if you got your council tax bill the other day, there's a leaflet in there. And every leaflet, every letter for the council tax bill, there's a leaflet to every household, which actually comes from the community together and tells people exactly where to find help for the situations, as we mentioned before. Now, I had a word with Wendy Patson, who's the portfolio holder for adult well-being, and I had a little discussion with her about it, and we got in touch with Emma Richardson, who was actually the County Council's Senior Manager Poverty Lead. She works also with, what was the girl's name, Julia, who is also the lead manager for the poverty area. And there's lots of things that they do. So they organise household support grants, spaces, holiday camps, employment, volunteering, and all these sorts of things, tax rebates, you name it. So there's already a system there that's ready to set up this. Now, what Emma said was actually arrange, if you want, for people to come to Hexham, probably send Julia, to be honest, to have a discussion and explain exactly what goes on county-wide, so that everybody is aware who to refer to. But a lot of this is, well, it's not exactly 24/7, though you can go through one-on-one and get help there that way, but it is a 7-day-a-week, and I can't remember the times, or something like 9 till 6. Oh, there it is there, sorry. It's 9 till 6, 7 days a week. For any point of any contact, you find anybody who's got any issues or struggling at all, there will be somebody through the Northumberland communities together who will respond and react and provide the help that is needed. Okay, so while I have no issues with this being brought up at all, not whatsoever, I do think that maybe it would be beneficial to bring Julie or whoever Emma decides to send down to talk with them to make sure that everything's covered. Because it may well be that we think something which is not that they're not covered. You say, yes, what are you doing about this? Oh, right, okay, thank you very much. You didn't actually cover that. I suspect I have, but I don't know for sure. So that would be my suggestion first. But then, if you find that in actual fact there is a role for this and it's not just duplication, then I would support it. But until then, I think at the moment we want to be careful it's not just duplication.
Yeah, I think excellent point what Penny made. You've got a thing on the pulse there, really. You've noticed something and you're acting on it, which is great. I think the town council does need to be a central point for lots of different things. I mean, people come to us like with the car parking, whatever, and want us to know what's going on. So Trevor's given us all that information. It would be really good if Trevor had that written down for Jane to hold, so that questions that come in can be quickly and efficiently dealt with, rather than having to ask around. So you've done all that work, Trevor. Maybe you could give it to Jane. That'd be great. But also, I think coordination within the committees would be useful. I mean, Councillor Lee Willis-Croft Ferris has already done some work on poverty proofing, working with Sam Gilchrist from the West Northumberland Food Bank, who is a really knowledgeable expert on some of the matters that you've touched on. So I think this would be useful to have this somewhere in CE committee, I would say, and move it on that way, maybe, and have that directory central. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, excellent points there, Ginny.
No, I was just going to ask Councillor Sesford, do you know whether there is any sort of crisis line for out of hours help?
The government are doing this together is crisis line in itself.
Right, but I mean,
Out of
outside of
hours, you can go to one-on-one peace line and they'll deal with that. Or you can phone up the county council and then Norman, which goes straight to the fire brigade control room.
Right,
They
so
have
if we were
they have all the
to find,
contacts for everybody that.
if we were to find people
So that
like
is-
that again,
Yeah,
that those
it's
details.
the fire brigade.
to change.
100% of that is
Right.
control centre as a emergency note afterwards. It's called the out of hours service.
Yeah.
You're not too quite sure what the fire brigade are going to do. It's not fire. So you're saying you're going to ring this number, you're going to find a homeless person, you're going to ring the fire brigade.
No, that's not what I said. The Ring County Council out of service. Ring County Council out of service numbers, which is answered by the fire brigade control officers out of hours.
So what, and then what do they do?
You have got a call to your county council to do for something that's wrong. It's always answered by the fire brigade control officers because they're on 24/7 shifts.
So they just act as an agency to control them, and then we'll pass it off to the relevant. So it wouldn't be that, they wouldn't bring the fire brigade there, they would move it to the right point.
But my point is that really we need to have a manual. This is what you do when you see this happening. And please can we just have it on our website or start with Jane so that it can be done efficiently and updated on a regular basis. Maybe
I think all the websites are really good at doing it because then it's accessible.
Yeah.
24/7.
I'm going to send that through you now, June.
Brilliant, thank you. Anybody else? Right, do you want to wrap it up?
Yes, and I appreciate what Trevor's saying, and I think that it is quite complex, and this is my experience. So there are people who qualify for particular types of care or assistance, and other people who don't. And it seems to me that these people that I was working with fell through the hole in the floorboards. And so, unless we understand as a town council, and we're at the front line, and we're the people that people come to about these sorts of issues. Unless we have an understanding that if that person wants to do this, they wanted to go to Romania. This wasn't about being housed and being on a housing list. So what do we do? And so there are particular circumstances and issues that are going to result in people being on the street. And I think we need to be as well informed as we possibly can. And then we'll act accordingly, and we can act in a timely fashion. The fact that those people will sleep on the street for probably 2 weeks, I think it's just not really sensible. So, I mean, we don't only have to meet once or twice and start compiling. I agree with Trevor that it'd be really useful if something the county council can stop us. So we want to do it on the point of knowledge.
Before you run seconds, the forest what's being said. If you know what Romanians, you may know that my partner is actually Romanian, so I did offer our services to the pieces in the Turkey. So please have a friend's number in Turkey if any Romanians, which is lovely.
No, that's really helpful, thank you.
So when I said I got serious, that's not quite right.
Yeah.
You should go into your I just have to mention it. You know.
Right, so, so we have a proposal on the table, which is set out there, at item 13, so we now have to go to the vote. So, those in favour of setting up this poverty working group, which I thought this is, maybe from reading this to what's been said tonight, it's changed what I thought this was about, actually. Proposal in front of us, so all those in favour of setting up this working group, please put your hand up. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those against? Abstentions? Everyone do it.
We're going to be asking the people to come and talk to us as well.
We'll do that. Are you abstaining? Abstain. So it's a 7, 7 for, 0 against, 2 abstentions. Right, so that's passed, and we will look to bring in. I think it's a really good suggestion, bringing county in to talk about these types of things. So again, I think this is really good that in principle that we're bringing up those hot issues in the town that people are talking about, the likes of the car park and the likes of, those being on the streets. So I think, let's have a reactive council that deal with these types of things. Right, 14, this is to note the draft minutes that goes with the meetings held in March. So we're looking at page 17, which is planning and infrastructure. So let's quickly go through those. Page 17, 18, and 19. Okay. Page 20, which is the finance and general purposes. So it's page 20 and 21. And next item is community engagement on page 22 and 23, 24. And then planning infrastructure on page 25, 26, 27, and 28. Okay, so that's those end off. Jean, what we're bring your next item is to note the correspondence, item 50.
Okay. Correspondence is NALF e-news, National NALF events and the Disability and Respect Project, CAN e-news, Northumberland CBA Support Services Info and Job Trustee vacancies, the London e-bulletin, temporary traffic regulation orders related to Station Road and Wyden Park, the Hexham Police Department election declaration of result, the adoption of Northumberland local plan, Great Northumberland Forest team and support for tree planting in your parish, a Hexham Space for Nature update, Transport North East advising its bid for funding from the Zero Emission Bus Regional Area Scheme being unsuccessful, Arthritis Action Events, the Northumberland Pharmacy Needs Assessment, Queen's Hall Administration and Finance Manager post, Castle and Coasts Housing Association on a Hexham Housing Needs Survey, the County Council consultation on the planning validation checklist, and a local resident contacting the councillors regarding a letter from a councillor printed in the grant before the recent election.
Anything being raised? Jenny?
I would like to first of all express my disappointment at the letter that was featured in the grant. I think since we were all elected last year, we have tried very, very hard to work together. And unfortunately, that particular letter, unfortunately, the councillor who wrote it is not here tonight. I would have very much liked to speak to him about it. But the letter in question, I think, was exceedingly unfair to put forward because it cast aspersions on the potential votes that would be cast by a group within the council. As it happened, it was completely unfounded in any way, and I felt that I was really disappointed that it felt like stirring trouble just before the election for the sake of stirring trouble. But I have a question as well, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, which is actually for Councillor Sesford, and this is a genuine thing that has been bothering me since I heard the outcome of the Northumberland County Council budget that was approved. And I wanted to ask Councillor Sesford, you voted against a rise in the town precept because of rising costs of living. But several weeks later, you voted for the county council budget rise of 4%, which is 2% over the cap at county council level, if that's, if my understanding is correct. And our precept is a part of that. I was bothered and confused by it. I wondered if you could explain, please.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to answer that. The council tax rate is 2% actually.
Sorry.
Because it goes more than, sorry, if it goes more than 2%, of course you have to have a full consultation, so that's why it was more than 2%. What you have, of course, you have another fund there which for adult service, adult service code?
Yeah.
I think it's adult service care, which is available to all councils to do that, so that's totally different. And that's nothing to do with the precept that was put by 28% by this council. Okay? So, I mean, but you know, I had actually something written down in case this question was brought up tonight, and I thought it wasn't going to be, so I'm quite happy to talk on the letter that was received by the clerk. It's the letter I'm thinking about. Because I haven't actually seen the letter that Stephen put in to the grant. I presume it was either to do with the budget, or it was to do with the million thing. I'm not sure which one. It's the million one, was it? The million one, okay? So, he said it was during the pre-election period. We also had a candidate stand up in the town council meeting here, made a political speech during the pre-election period. I wouldn't have allowed that. So that's what I'm by the date. So that's what you asked the questions. You asked the questions, so I didn't say a word when you were talking, so, you know. And there's lots of other things that maybe we should think about. But I'm not really sure you get so aggrieved about this because you might have noticed there's only two candidates. It was Tom, who's brave enough to stand as a conservative, which is not always easy at all times. I mean, sometimes it's easier than others, and sometimes it's not as easy as others. And then you have the Hexham candidates, and they were all opposed. Why were they unopposed? I know exactly why they were unopposed, because there was a pattern that put anybody else against it. So don't tell me that's not devious in one step. And open Hexham candidates, where did the open Hexham candidates come from? Right? Well, the people who vote get elected to stand on their own, because as Greens, I mean, the Green men get elected. There's people who are in favour of Corbyn and momentum things, but they didn't put up for that. None of them joined the open Hexham thing. The people who dressed as polar bears. Yeah, and I know that's a fact because I've seen them. And people who support people who glue themselves to the road and cable tie themselves to football posts. But they stood as open Hexham. They were deceiving the public, you see, because I've got here some of the ways that open Hexham said it would work. None of which to do it presently. So, you know, before you think about the little letter, which unfortunately I can't comment on the words of it, because I didn't actually see it. I think you want to wonder what's going on. Remember, it's Green, Extinction Rebellion. They wouldn't have won a seat if they hadn't got together and come to the public and understanding as open Hexham. Okay? What about the claims that yourself and your fellow partner put up about our leaflets in the previous election, when actually fact laws were printed further away than ours?
Right,
So well, you know, if I'm going to be accused that I've got a whole list here, I can accuse you of.
No.
I think you have to be careful what you say.
No more. Right. This was supposed to be about the correspondence, and it's just gone all over the place, and that's not right. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. So,
So he has to say lies, does he?
no,
That's
stop,
incredible.
stop.
Absolutely
Stop. Right.
Can
Yeah,
I
it's
just ask
shocking.
what points of procedure?
Yeah.
Can I just ask, so James read out a list of correspondence that is circulated to town council members, and a lot of them must like standard, but this was a particular letter that was written by someone who lives in the town. What is our procedure? Do we answer that question, or do we just say thank you for your comments and log them? What do we do in response to individual people writing to the town council rather than from CAN or, your list of correspondence is predominantly, we're on circulars, but this was a very specific letter about conduct. And I just wondered not saying whether it's legitimate or not, I just wonder what the process is for us replying to that person, what we do with that letter.
Well, I acknowledged it, and advised that it would be listed as part of the correspondence at this meeting. It's entirely up to the council whether you want to make any further response to that, as it specifically has to be circulated around all councillors. But my concern is relating to the code of conduct and the member officer relations protocol, which is specifically relating to party politics within the town council, can cause particular difficulties in terms of the impartiality of the clerk and other staff, and it should be avoided if at all possible, which is why this has been considered.
Right, okay, thank you.
Not what should happen. I should have intervened well before that. It was wrong, and I think some of the statements are just complete nonsense, to be honest. But there we go. Right. Any urgent matters?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say that as one of 3 people who brought into life a group that started 3 weeks ago called Hexham Together for Ukraine, really positive developments. We've got 182 people on our mailing list, local residents mainly, who all expressed an interest to find a community-wide, Hexham-wide response to Ukrainian refugee crisis. That could be anything from hosting to supporting hosts to fundraising for things that need to be sent across to Poland or Ukraine even, or even local fundraising for local issues to do with this. So we're very pleased that we had 51 community representatives at the first meeting. Very lucky that Community Partnership helped with finding the addresses of everybody and getting in touch with them. We had people from the community centre to number 28, from the Rotary Club to Churches Together. It was a very wide spectrum of people, which was lovely. Followed on by a big meeting where there was standing room only upstairs at Beaumont, that they kindly donated the room for us. And it was astonishing. So right now we're in the process of setting up projects groups. And I just wanted to let the public know that there's a website coming out. It's called Hexham for Ukraine. Will be live in a couple of days. In fact, we registered it. It will just be live in a couple of days, where more information will be available. We're learning on the move. It's super fast what we're doing, and there will be gaps on the website. But if people can get in touch and let us know the information that they know, then we can populate the website and help as many people as possible. That's it.
Well, that's what we like to hear about Hexham doing that type of stuff, and not what we just heard. And obviously, that's what we like to see: positivity, people working together, and not slagging one another off. Right, okay then. So that's the end of the evening, and thank you all for your attendance.
Thanks.